In the Great War, they were deployed for over 6 straight months in the field.
This week of Sabaton history, the Harlem Hellfighters.
Is Satan going to be involved in this episode?
Satan is always involved.
Yeah.
From a land across the ocean to the western front where they served, full of courage and devotion, because that's a sun. As the spring offenses kept churning, where the men would earn their name. See the tides of battle turning, and the force ignite their flame.
Hellfighters. That is what the Germans called them, the men of the U.S. 369th Infantry Regiment based in Harlem. So, Harlem Hellfighters is how they are remembered today. And you know what? They served for 191 days under fire, 6 straight months, which was the longest deployment of any American unit during the Great War. But they never lost a foot of ground, nor ever had a man taken prisoner. Now, the unit was originally the 15th Infantry Regiment of the New York National Guard. This was created already before that war, and it was after pressure from people in black communities who wanted to serve in the U.S. National Guard. When the U.S. joined the war and began sending troops to Europe in 1917, the 369th was shipped out December 27th. They arrived in France on New Year's Day 1918 and joined the 185th Infantry Brigade. Their unit was not given combat training, though, but they were instead assigned manual labor duties like digging latrines. And they experienced a great deal of racial harassment from Army officials. American Commander John Pershing sort of loaned the 369th to the French 161st Division in April, and it was only after that they would begin to earn their combat honors. The unofficial reason for this loan really was that some white soldiers refused to serve alongside African Americans. In fact, the American Expeditionary Force even released a pamphlet, which I guess I can best describe as incredibly racist, to the whole French army, a pamphlet called Secret Information Concerning Black American Troops, or SICBAT. SICBAT requested that the French troops, most of whom did not share the prevalent racist views of their American counterparts, or at least not to the point of segregation, it requested that they stop treating African Americans as equals. It warned of their tendency towards rape, claiming, quote, "The black American troops in France have, by themselves, given rise to as many complaints for attempted rape as the rest of the army." This was not true. It also requested that the French troops not eat meals with them, or even shake hands with them, nor commend them too highly, as this would lead to them thinking themselves more important than they were. And that, could be harmful to American society after the war. The French army, for its part, basically just welcomed the reinforcements. They'd been fighting and dying on their own land for 3 years by then. New soldiers were a godsend. In mid-April, the 369th was assigned to a 4.5-kilometer stretch of the front in the Argonne, under the command of French General Henri Gouraud. And they were issued French rifles and helmets and things like that. Their motto was, "God damn, let's go." They still did not receive combat training, though. Well, as I said at the beginning, they served for over 6 straight months, and they suffered 1,300 casualties during that time, which was the most of any U.S. Army regiment. Yet, despite their obvious bravery, they were not well treated. Combat troops were sometimes taken out of the line to serve as orderlies. Pay was stopped to nearly the entire regiment at one point. They had to go through things like that. And it wasn't just during the war either. When they left France to go home in early 1919, their regimental band wasn't even allowed to play as they marched to the transport ship. It was February when the by then Harlem Hellfighters returned to New York. And they had a victory parade along Fifth Avenue led by Sergeant Henry Johnson. The parade really showcased that whatever had happened overseas, it was not reflected back home, since the parade was all black. The Hellfighters and the other African American regiments were not allowed to participate in the main victory parade. That was strictly segregated. Having said that, they were the first New York unit to return home, and they were placed on the permanent list like other veteran units. The French government, by the way, awarded the Croix de Guerre, the highest military honor, to 170 soldiers of the 369th, including Henry Johnson, the parade leader, who was the first American to receive that award for their efforts and their achievements during the war. Johnson performed some of the most remarkable feats of this or any other war in May 1918. He was a private at the time. Okay, the night of the 14th, he and another private, Needham Roberts, were on sentry duty. Now, Johnson would later say that he thought it was crazy to send out untrained men as sentries, but a job is a job and an order is an order. Well, the two came under fire from German snipers. They're pinned down in their dugout, so they lined up a box of grenades to be ready just in case the Germans raided them. Just after 2 a.m., Johnson heard wire cutters at the perimeter fence, and he told Roberts to hightail it back and alert the French. Then Johnson threw a grenade, which the Germans answered with grenades and gunfire. Roberts turned back to help Johnson, but was hit by grenade shrapnel and was badly injured. Johnson managed to get him back to the dugout, but now they were outnumbered by 20 or 30 Germans coming from multiple directions. Johnson ran out of grenades, and he even took a few bullets, but he kept on firing his rifle into the darkness until it jammed. He had accidentally put in French ammunition in the American rifle. Well, the Germans were right on top of him after that, so he used his rifle as a club until the stock splintered. Johnson took a blow to the head and he went down. But when the Germans tried to grab Roberts, Johnson got up again and attacked them with his bolo knife, the only weapon he had left. He wounded one German, killed another, took a pistol shot to the arm, and stabbed yet another German who'd climbed on his back. Suddenly, the Germans ran away since they heard the French and Americans arriving on the scene. Johnson had reportedly killed 4 Germans and wounded over 24, and he himself sustained 21 wounds. You can imagine the praise he received for this, but he said later, "There wasn't anything so fine about it, just fought for my life. A rabbit would have done that." He was given the nickname Black Death after this, and post-war he would do lecture tours. On these tours, he was supposed to talk about racial harmony in the trenches, which was a big fat lie. And in some places, he definitely did not do this, talking instead about the abuse and the harassment he and his comrades had to endure. Now, contrary to what multiple sources claim, he did receive disability pay from the US government. But also contrary to multiple sources, when he died in 1929, it was from myocarditis and not alcoholism. But you know what? Henry Johnson was not awarded any medals by the US Army or the US government until posthumously long after his death. But hey, back to that regimental band. Maybe you think it's not too big a deal that they weren't allowed to play on the march to the ship, just a little snub. But their band was a big deal. Like other regimental bands, they played to boost morale. But unlike other regimental bands, by the end of the war, they were one of the most famous bands in all of Europe. In early 1918, they traveled thousands of kilometers playing for British, French, and American military and French civilian audiences, and introduced early jazz music to Europe, which was a very big deal. James Reese Europe, the leading figure of New York's African-American music scene during the teens, was their band leader. His story has a tragic end, though. He was stabbed by one of his musicians May 9th, 1919, during an argument in a show's intermission. But since it was only with a little penknife, he and his bandmates thought the wound, even though it was in the neck, was superficial. He told the band to finish the show after the intermission. But the hospital was unable to stop the bleeding, and he died a few hours later. Then he was the first African American ever to have a public funeral in New York City. There are a bunch of notable soldiers of the 369. You can look them up yourself, and there are loads of books about the Harlem Hellfighters out there too, which will give you a better idea of the unit, the men, their service, and of course the trials they faced because of their skin color, as well as details about the frontline combat the Harlem Hellfighters bravely fought in the war to end all wars. Okay, Joakim, what is this interview about?
Harlem Hellfighters.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, well, go.
Thank you. Well, actually, this is one of the stories that already when we did the Great War album was one of the first that came to our mind. However, it didn't make it on the album, which was one of the topics people were asking about.
Sure.
How did you miss that? But just we didn't have the music, you know.
Okay, so that was like Christmas Truce.
Exactly.
Came out. Okay.
One of the top stories that we, you know, came straight to us directly when talking about making an album about the Great War.
Yeah.
That was one of the first topics. But yeah, we didn't have the right music. It's a weird thing that it's kind of important that the music and the story speak the same emotional language. And yeah, we tried to squeeze it in onto other songs, you know, but no, it didn't work out. But I'm really happy that we did, because it has a bit more of a punishing vibe to it, the music as well. And it was sort of, when me and Chris wrote the music, we sort of, I mean, when we started, we didn't know what we were writing, but it wasn't long until, I'd say, you know, maybe once we had the idea of a verse or a chorus, we already felt like, this is the one. This is the one about the Harlem Hellfighters.
But that's interesting that you say you started writing the music, because obviously if you had the idea for this, one might think that you had already maybe written lyrics, but hadn't figured music. Was it all written at the same time, the music and the lyrics together?
No, in this case, we sort of figured out what it was as we were writing the music.
Okay.
In most cases, when writing music, you have an idea of around what it possibly could be, or sometimes, I'm sorry to burst any bubbles here, sometimes you're just playing around trying to come up with a cool-ass riff, you know, or something like that.
Or you're writing in a toilet visit on toilet paper.
That has happened too.
That has happened. Check that episode out. Well, what was the actual first song you wrote for the Great War then? The very first one, music and lyrics.
For the Great War, I don't remember. But for the War to End All Wars, it was Christmas Truce.
It was Christmas Truce.
It was Christmas Truce, because I promised myself, once we realized we're going to go back into that, you know, World War I era again, that I'm going to make that first so we don't miss it.
Well, okay, what was the last one?
Oh, good question. You shouldn't ask me things I don't remember, you know.
You can tell we really prepare for these interview sections,
exactly.
You know. List of questions.
I don't really remember. Oh yeah, I do. Stormtroopers was the final one to be finished.
Cool.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
What was it about Hellfighters, other than the fact that, you know, people had, you know, written in asking for it and things like that? What was it that grabbed you so much about them that you really wanted it as one of the very first topics, whether or not you could make a song about it?
I think the story, obviously, but also it has the coolest metal name, isn't it? For a heavy metal song, Hellfighters.
That's one of your most metal names.
Yeah, it is.
Metalizer is pretty, but that's not really history.
Nah, it's a pretty shitty song as well. Sorry. But
they're your songs. I'm going to start saying about some of their songs.
Probably piss somebody off who really likes that song now.
One of these days, we should be talking about one of your songs. You could be, I don't know, pick anyone. And you'll say, I'm not going to ask you how you wrote the song, because it's kind of a shitty one.
Yeah.
So I'll just
save that one.
Now, when you were writing the song, you obviously were doing research about the Hellfighters. Were you researching about the individuals, like Henry Johnson, who I just talked about?
Yeah, because obviously back in the day, I think in 2010, we had a song about a guy called the White Death, Simo Häyhä.
Oh yeah, of course.
And then we read about there was somebody called the Black Death.
Yeah.
And then sort of that piqued the interest and made it even more interesting in a way.
There's got to be some more colored deaths out there that you could do songs about.
Pink Death.
It's got to be a red. There's going to be a red death somewhere.
Yeah,
because you know, blood and stuff that.
I was thinking about the color used usually in a certain kind of politics.
Ooh, you guys, we might have a whole Sabaton album theme coming up. It could be called "The Colors of Death," and you could do another song about Simo Häyhä, and another song. You could do a whole song about Henry Johnson. I mean,
absolutely.
I mean, you heard the story I just told. I mean, that's brilliant, and I love. He actually, there was more colorful language than I just used when he said that sending untrained soldiers out on sentry duty was crazy. It was a little more emphatic than that. That was what he actually said. But it is crazy. I mean, can you imagine that? Imagine these guys did not have combat training, right? They were first just, you know, digging toilets and things like terrible menial jobs. But somebody has to do it in wartime. But you know, being African American soldiers, they got stuck with it with the American Army at the time. But they still didn't get combat training when they were with the French, when they were loaned to the French. But they were in combat. I mean, they got combat training on the job, but you would usually prefer that beforehand, you know?
Yeah, that's something you really want some training on before doing it. You know?
Yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, think what it must have been like to be not just fighting in the war, but to be one of the Harlem Hellfighters fighting in the war. To not be trained, to be doing sentry duty, to still manage to kill 4 Germans and wound like 20 more.
Imagine how exhausted you are after that time long of a deployment.
Yeah. What did I say? 192 or 193 days? You just heard it 10 minutes ago. I forget exactly how many it was. But that's over 6 straight months. And something I did not mention in the episode, they made up in terms of amount of people. The Harlem Hellfighters were like 1% of the American armed forces there, but they were deployed. It's over 30% of the
total deployment time.
Yeah, of the territory that they would allotted to them. They had a large amount of territory to cover and stuff. I mean, it wasn't particularly
doing with
active.
the French or on
when they
own?
were alone with the French. I mean, no, their territory where they were assigned to.
Okay.
Their assignment and stuff. Somebody would have to look up the exact numbers, which you can do that, and then you can write it in the comments.
Homework.
So, it's nice giving people homework, you know? Maybe.
Let's see who's first on the comments with that one.
Wait, here's a good homework for somebody who really, really wants the gold star, somebody who really wants a special little present from me and Joakim. We'll decide what it is later. Write a song about Henry Johnson.
Yeah.
Write a song about Henry Johnson. Send it in. We might not play it to anyone, but if it's really good, we can give them a present of something, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's pretty good. All jokes aside, I mean, what they had to endure and what they achieved is, you could say that about many units during the war because it was such a war of privations and problems and issues, and the desperation in the trenches and stuff, and the bravery that kept people going. But still, this should be a tribute. So we'll end it as a tribute. Ladies and gentlemen, the Harlem Hellfighters endured a great deal without combat training, and yet emerged as one of the most legendary units of not just the Great War, but the 20th century. Right?
Indeed.
All right. Well, that is it for today.
All from Sabaton History. Hope to see you again very soon.
Very soon. Satan.
All right, everyone, that's it for this week. So remember to click that bell. It's really important. Click it now. And then, hope to see you again in the near future. Bye-bye.